So I think there would be no way to talk about transitional accents if I didn't show you, all the effects that went into this. Now, we do have transitional accents that actually help our transitions and cohesion, which are like, let's say, these chords that play just a tiny bit of that chord progression before the first bar and after the first bar. That gives us a nice transition, nice, accent for the transition. So that gives us a nice transitional accent. So every time that happens, it always happens on the actual, first kick drum of the 4 bars. Now, another thing we do to always accentuate those are these uprisers, uplifters, these sweeps that go up and down, and they help us with these transitions going upwards, signaling to the listener that something is about to happen, and then this, crash impact things that actually give us, accents, accentuation of having something happen. So giving the listener a sign that this is where it explodes. Yeah. So all of these sound just like this. So you see, those are the uplifters and downlifters, those sweeps up and down that we have that help all of those transitions, and the way the energy sounds in those transitions be even more natural, be even more accentuated in the sense that the listener knows something's coming as soon as all of these start rising up. And all of these rises, you can get those out of sample packs. You can create some of your own using, sound design, using synthesizers and the things we learned about modulators, so LFOs and envelopes. So you can make those yourself. You can take samples. But aside of those, what we also use as a transitional accent are all of these small pauses that happen, and something maybe even happening in that pause. Like right here, we have this hit, this one. Let me play that for you solo. So we have that happening right there in that pause. So let's hear what that sounds like. That sounds well enough. I think I'm just going to prolongate this so it doesn't really happen, like that. It doesn't really finish so hard on that note. I think it sounds more natural, just like that. Now let's see, what can we also do in some of these? So I've shown you just before that I've made a certain pause right here to help this transition from one to the other. Now, if I didn't have that, this switch up that happens where, the bass is stop and all of these leads start, doesn't really sit that well. But just introducing that small pause in all of the drums and the bass, actually in the element that is going to stop and a few elements around it, it's easier to swallow. It's easier to swallow than to have all of this just stop all of a sudden right there and everything else happen. Although we do have, you see, that crash, that impact to, accentuate that new piece of music is happening right now. It's starting right now. It's somehow more natural if this happens, if we have this pause introduced, that dip and then another explosion, so that somewhat during this pause, you already forget this bass. You already forget that was happening, and then we exchange it for this. So this pause lets us switch up the bass into all of these leads that start happening right here. And we have those pauses a lot during this arrangement. So what I'm going to do now is going to do that same pause right here. That's just half of a beat, so I need an entire beat like that, maybe even more, but let's see. This, I know that this sounds good for sure. That's very nice. So I like that. And we have that pause right here too at the ending. So one of the elements, as I see, has continued. That's our snare. And I can, our reverse snare, and I can delete this. But, there is no need actually, because, it's silence in that part. I'm just going to delete that for the visual part of me recognizing that there is nothing there. Now you see there is no line right there. I don't have to, re-question myself. What is this? I have a piece, being left there. Something's happening, like as if I had a snare. It doesn't really sound that cool. Maybe if I split those like that and said split, and then inside this snare, where it is, like that, did this. So duplicated this note twice, just like that, okay? Now, when I have that done, I'm gonna copy that to the channel below. No, that double clap, I don't like it. So, tried, didn't work. The actual pause of silence in all of those drums just actually sounds much better. So I like the way it happens. One thing I also want to try is to stop, see this sweep up. I want to stop it as soon as, all the drums stop, to accentuate that stop actually, so the more elements stop at that point and we isolate only the chord playing at the ending as a thing to listen to, Nice. I like that. I'm going to keep it that way, and I think I'm going to do the same thing right here when the same thing happens right here. So I'm going to move it backwards. Nice. I like that. So you see, FX help us with those transitional accents. We add those to actually give us a nice transitional vibe where some of them lift up, and the listener is getting a cue that something is going to happen soon. And then these give him a transitional like energy sweep downwards, where they have a feeling of something falling down. That's a really common effect, in electronic dance music today. And not only that, in pop music and everything, actually, it's quite commonly used everywhere. So we have those sweeps up and down. It's usually some sort of a filter going upwards in the frequency spectrum, or a pitch of a certain element going upwards, and also pitch going downwards in the sweeps down. So we have those to help us, and we have certain amount of all of those pauses where certain elements just stop. And usually those elements are the high energy ones, like the drums, the bass. So we stop those and leave others to, just play in that pause solo, to play alone. So we stop the high energy elements so that, that pause introduces a brief interruption, and then they start playing again. Just like that. And it sounds cool because stopping the highest level energy, and they are also the highest in volume, so we stop those and start them again, and that gives us a nice interruption and a dip in the energy, and makes transitions easier to swallow, if stuff is happening before the transition and after. We have different elements introduced, so that kind of a pause tells the listener to expect a change even. So it's easier to make a change by doing something just like this. Having those pauses, having all these effects, telling the listener that something's going to happen. So nothing in here happens out of the blue. Like you're not even guessing that something is going to happen. You almost know, you're certain that something is happening soon, because you hear that riser coming in, you hear their energy, getting swelling up, and then you have the pause, and then you're expecting something else, and that something else happens. Now, the only place we actually omitted that pause was right here with the drums and the bass, because we transferred into a silence. So I'm thinking that I want this bass also to continue playing right there, and this thing too, because it's bounced. I'm missing that note, so I'm just going to repeat this part of it just like that. I'm going to duplicate that part, Let me see the breaks in. Yeah, I'm going to stop those. So no, I'm gonna stop the basses. It was the right decision from the beginning that they were not there, but the drums can continue. Nice. Now, one more thing you can notice it is that I have this, like FX kick drum that I turned the warp off in the lesson before, because this kick drum has the bass frequencies in it. And you can notice that this kick drum that has the bass frequencies in it never plays with the actual drums where we already have a kick drum and the bass or any bass frequencies in there. So that kick drum only plays right there, right here, at the beginning of the build-up, also no bass frequencies, and it also plays right here, the beginning of the song, beginning of the build-up, just like there. So none of those places actually has any bass frequencies happening at all. That's just a kick drum with a lot of reverb on it, like this. Gives you for a nice transition in a sense where all of those low frequencies actually stopped right there. So this helps me make more of an impact. Since I already have the crash making an impact in the highs, I have this impact making an impact in the mid frequencies, like that, also highs and mids, and now I have the kick drum at the same time making an impact in the low frequency area. All of those. Maybe this kick drum with the reverb could even be higher, so I'm just going to click right here on the fader of the volume and use my arrows on my keyboard to go up 1, 2, let's say 3 dBs. 4. Yep, I like it. So I'm going to save this and I'm going to leave the song in this actual state so that we can deal with, headroom, maybe loudness, checking out, the preliminary levels of this mix before we get into the real mixing stage where we deal with all the details, all the tiny nuances. But for now, I also want this song to have a pretty good balance between the elements, so that when I play the song and I'm trying to maybe feel if it's missing something, if I should add something, if the arrangement is good enough, it needs to have a normally balanced mix somewhat, so that I can actually judge on if it's missing energy, if it's has too much energy in some of the parts. So that mix needs to be somewhere in the ballpark at least, so that I could judge on the quality of my arrangement, quality of my transitions, of course, too, and all the things that we just talked in this transitions level, where we deal with cohesive progression, energy management, transitional accents. All of those things are easier to judge upon if our mix is somewhere in the ballpark where it sounds already good enough.